Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome back. This is A Marvelous, and thank you for tuning in. This video is going to be a little different. It's going to incorporate a few things, but I wanted to discuss something that I had just seen and an issue, an article, front page article from a magazine called Nexus. And the cover of that magazine said, "Is cryptocurrency a tool to enslave?" And that was pretty much touching on something that I've been wondering about in terms of cryptocurrency, because obviously this all a rave right now. Everybody's on that. So this particular magazine, this particular article was basically covering the history of cryptocurrency and exploring whether or not it's a tool to free individuals, or is it really just another front to enslave individuals and restrict their privacy even more and control us to an even higher degree. So as I was going to do the video on that article, I figured I might as well add something else that obviously you won't see in the media, that I think is very important, that I think everybody should know about, because it does represent a turning point, not in this country, in regards to our freedoms and our privacy and the type of human beings that we're going to have to do and be just to survive in this country. But anyway, the article was exploring cryptocurrency, and it was just basically giving the history of cryptocurrency and things like that. Now, the whole premise of cryptocurrency is the technology behind it, which is pretty much blockchain. And the whole premise behind blockchain is that its main function is to give the individual privacy, right? So if you send a transaction, I send a transaction, or if I store something, it's supposedly not possible to be hacked into because of the way that it's set up. It's open source and it's regulated by everyone. So it's constantly changing as purchases and transactions are made. Blocks get bigger. It becomes harder for what's called the problem to solve to create a new block. So for all of these reasons and these encryptions, the premise behind cryptocurrency is the technology, which is blockchain, which is supposedly unhackable. Now, no one knows who really created this technology, right? The name that's attributed to it, we don't even know if that's a real person. But what the magazine did touch on was that this country, the NSA, has been exploring cryptocurrencies and digital transference of currency since 1996. There was actually a white paper done by the NSA back in 96. I had no clue. I was just graduating high school, which makes you wonder, what is it that's going on now that's in its infancy that we have no clue on, that's going to affect us 20 years from now? Because if they had this paper since 1996 on the possibilities of transferring digital information and digital currency across different networks and from people to people, and here we are now, it's no telling what we're just not privy to right now. But anyway, so NSA has been on cryptocurrency and exploring this as an option since 1996. And I always talk about the Economist magazine, 1988. They was always talking about the one world currency. If you study certain things, you know that. But now it's actually tangible reality, to the point to where they have underground markets, which I'm going to discuss in this video, solely based on crypto, digital currency. No cash, no banks, none of that. So I recently, not too long ago, started purchasing some crypto just so I can hedge my bets and kind of learn more about it by actively doing it. But reading this magazine, it kind of made me wonder, exactly, is this something that's actually anonymous? Is this something that's untraceable? Because the magazine made it a point to say that this isn't a technology for you to be anonymous, it's a technology for you to be private. So when I read that, I said it makes sense. There was a big incident that happened this summer that pretty much was not really a big thing in the media, obviously, and it kind of made me explore, made me want to do this video. there was an underground network called AlphaBay. And AlphaBay was started by a Canadian gentleman named Alexandre Cazes. And in this network, you can buy anything: drugs, chemicals, you name it. This was a underground system and network where you can do anything you needed, purchase anything you want, using crypto, and it was supposedly anonymous. So this was after, well, the first one that was started was a few years ago, back in 2009, I believe. It was called Silk Road. And Silk Road was the first time that a major operation was busted, with the organization using cryptocurrency. So that kicked it off. So that kind of put cryptocurrency on the radar back in '09. And when it, busted up a few years later, this Silk Road was kind of like the foundation to criminal organizations and criminal enterprise in regards to cryptocurrency. So when the feds busted that up, that kind of put crypto on the map. More people started to know about it, and it kind of solidified cryptocurrency's place in the world. Fast forward 2017, AlphaBay, which was even larger than Silk Road, they call it Silk Road 2.0, was just busted up, and the founder, who was a Canadian, Alexandre Cazes, was arrested back on July. I think it was July 4th, ironically. And long story short, this gentleman killed himself. He died because he was facing, I think, 100 years. Now, what makes this interesting is that they didn't catch him in the U.S., right? The feds, caught him because he was around the world, right? He had at least $12 million, and most of that was in cryptocurrency. He had this money stashed in Bitcoin. He had this money stashed in Ethereum. He had this money stashed in Litecoin, all kinds of currencies. But what makes this interesting and why it's something that we should all pay attention to is that the Fed snatched his money, and they snatched his Lamborghini, and they snatched his possessions outside the United States, right? So you have to ask yourself, right? This Canadian individual set up this operation, lived outside the United States, but yet the United States was able to go snatch all his stuff, and they was preparing to extradite him back to the States. And if you read the court case, you'll see that they're using it based on him violating laws from Eastern California, Eastern District. Why this is scary is because if you're in another country, right, if the U.S. can just up and snatch you out of a country, that means that you're pretty much not safe anywhere. And even if you don't commit a crime, if the U.S. feels you did, then this shows that they can snatch you no matter how much dough you got, no matter where you at. Now, this dude had property, cars, money in Bangkok, Singapore, right, Antigua, at least 4 or 5 different locations, and they snatched all his stuff. So it makes you wonder, how is this possible? How is this possible if he set up a network using systems that was supposedly anonymous, supposedly you can't trace, right? And he wasn't in the U.S. It makes you think, is this cryptocurrency, is this blockchain, is it really private, or is it really traceable, being that this could be something that possibly set up by government? So that's kind of scary, and it's a long list of confiscations that happen. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because this is the world that we're living in. Right now, we're in a situation to where you have to be technologically savvy just to do basic things. And I realized that when I was purchasing the crypto and transferring the money, I felt like a hacker. So this is where we're going. But it's scary because if this is where we're going and this is something that's inevitable, then your level of privacy might be even less. Reading this book helped me understand blockchain more. This is called Blockchain Revolution: How the Technology Behind Bitcoin is Changing Money, Business, in the World, right? Now, this book cheerleads for cryptocurrency and blockchain, but it gives a basic understanding for it. Now, this book was also funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, so that also makes me a little suspicious that they're pushing this heavy in order to get everyone under a certain umbrella to make it easy to hurt us. So in dealing with blockchain and dealing with cryptocurrency, what I'm seeing is that it's good to kind of be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. If you're going to learn about the technology, I think that's best. Most people are doing cryptocurrency just so they can invest, just so they can make money. These are your speculators, right? The people that just do that, they don't get the point. Because the reason why cryptocurrency is so big is not necessarily because of the currency, it's because of the technology, right? The technology of each crypto allows you to do so much that it's amazing. You know, your ability to send money without a third party is huge. Your ability to store your own information and control who gets your information is huge. So if you're using a Google or Facebook or any of these third parties, and in order to do that, they ask you to allow access. But with this technology, you can refuse that, and then you can still, because it's open source, modify the technology and operate with these applications the way you want to. So that's huge. That's the benefit. The negative is that we don't know who created it. And if the government did create this, as you see, if this person can have millions of dollars, Lamborghinis, be a hacking tech genius, right, and still get caught outside the country to the point where they're going to extradite him from Thailand, then nobody is safe. This is a whole new level of control. So it's almost like you have to be hacker present or technologically sound just to do basic things. And this AlphaBay situation is crucial. Now, it's even more crucial because the founder of AlphaBay, he killed himself. Alexandre Cazes, he killed himself because he was facing 100 years. They was going to extradite him from Thailand to the U.S. Now, because of this, I had to start looking at foreign policy. A lot of times we see foreign policy, we see things on the news, and we're like, okay, I don't want to hear about Israel and Palestine, or none of that's non-stimulating, right? When you see things about the United Nations and things like that, it's dry, right? It's not something that that appeals to most people. It's what they say, boring, even though I don't like to use that word. But looking at cryptocurrency, looking at blockchain, and looking at where we're going in the future, it made me understand more the importance of understanding foreign policy. Now, I think the reason why he was able to get captured, outside of some foolish things that he was doing, big ass purchases and things like that, and other minor things as to why he got caught, was because if you have to look at, when you're looking at crime on an international level, you're dealing with a few things. You're dealing with U.S. relationships with these countries. So if a person commits a crime here, and they think, or if they have a lot of money, and they think they're going to have offshore accounts and store like that, people think that that's a safe haven. But I don't think they're taking into account the fact that you cannot hide, because this is a global thing, right? In the past 50 or 60 years, it's been a race for consolidation, and the power structure has set up infrastructures to where the globe, the planet is mapped out into zones, right? And these zones, the people, the countries, the rulers of these countries, they communicate and participate with each other. So when you have something like the United Nations, that right there is a centralized body that facilitates communication to all countries around the world. So there is no hiding. And I say that to say, anytime you're dealing with international crime, or anytime you think you're going to escape something, there's two things that people overlook. That's Interpol and the United Nations, right? The foreign policy, extradition treaties. Interpol was set up to protect Rothschild money and money of the banking families, the power structure. These families that run everything realize that in order for them to keep control, there's going to be rogue elements that's going to challenge them, and that's going to always threaten their finances. And the ways that their finances are threatened is by people that live in a subculture or an underground world. This subculture, like hackers, counterfeiters, people that are off the grid, that don't work jobs and that just manage to survive, generate commerce off the books. These people live on the fringe. They're on the subculture. So when Interpol was set up decades ago, these banking families understood that they because they're international, they're not just localized into one area. They needed an international police monitoring system. That's what Interpol is. It was set up to protect the banking families and the Rothschild money. So, with that said, these individuals like Alexandre Cazes and founders of Silk Road, or anybody that's thinking of crime internationally and things like that, they're not taking into account which countries are member nations of Interpol, right? And if you look at where this dude got caught, he got caught in Thailand, right? He got caught in Antigua. He got caught in Singapore, right? So if you look at the member nations of Interpol, there's a lot of them. They were on that list. So if you're gonna commit these crimes, and I'm not suggesting anybody commit crimes, I'm just showing that the network, it's not, you're not just a member, even if you think you are, of where you live. You are actually participating in the global scheme, period. And if you have all of these member countries that's a part of one international police force, there is no hiding. It's just a matter of time. So that's why I say it's important to look at foreign policy, because also if you look at what's called extradition, right? Each country has a relationship with the other country. They have these contracts and treaties that says, okay, if someone from our part of the world goes to your part of the world, and we feel that they have committed a crime in our part of the world, but they're in your part of the world, we know we don't have jurisdiction to just come in there and debo and take over and snatch our citizen from your part of the world. So in order for us to avoid this person fleeing and escaping our law, we're going to have these treaties that says, okay, if we have someone we feel has committed a crime and he's went into your part of the world, we want to be able to come and get him. But we can't do that unless you give us permission. So when you see United Nations and you see all of these things happen on the news, it's wise to pay attention, because what these are doing is setting up formats into which countries can be more diplomatic with each other, right? More harmonious. And that's what the United Nations was set up for. Why is this not a good thing? Is because these policies that are set up amongst these countries, right, when they gather and they have these meetings and everything is on the world stage, is that they become a select group of people in which represent all the people on planet Earth, right? So if you don't have the average person that has access or say-so in these meetings of all these world bodies, then what happens is you have the people that run these countries speaking on the citizens' behalf. So you have each country, right, having their own representatives meeting with other heads of state around the world at the United Nations, and they're speaking on our behalf. So if you have something like police brutality or whatever it is that's a social injustice that the people might feel happens in that region, if they don't have the people that represent those people that have been victimized, then what you do is you have individuals that run the country speaking on our behalf, and those issues can be sheltered and not brought to the forefront amongst other countries that meet at the United Nations. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous. So when you see situations like this is a crime situation. Gentlemen set up a network where you can buy drugs, you can buy people, all of these things. So because of that, it seems as if something like the United Nations is beneficial. But when you have a social injustice, it's not beneficial, because these issues are not being spoke about when these United Nations meetings happen. Now that's important, because part of the United Nations is to have a world court, right? An international court that focuses on human rights violations. So if the U.S., right, which we know is horrible with social justice, if it is said that the United States of America is constantly violating human rights of their inhabitants, the International Court in the United Nations is supposed to address that and kind of bring the United States to trial, because it has other member countries that's a part of it with a lens to the U.S. looking at what the people are complaining about. But if the U.S. is constantly not addressing these issues amongst these other member countries, right, then the issues of the people are not being spoken about, and it's being hit under the table. So therefore, other countries, when they meet, have no idea what's going on, and if they do, it's probably through media outlets, but the people aren't being heard. So when you see instances like this with AlphaBay, it's pretty much showing that this country is deciding what is on a national scale and what's not. If they can go into another country and snatch anybody at will, that right there is a violation of rights. But when you have these extradition treaties, which are basically pacts and contracts that says we, the U.S., can come into Singapore because you give us permission, right? We're going to let you know that we have a supposed criminal in your land. We're going to come snatch him up. Is that okay? Because these treaties are signed between countries, Singapore says, all right, no problem. We're going to hold him until you get here. They get there and they snatch him up. That's what happened to this Alexandre dude that founded AlphaBay. He was in Thailand. They snatched his possessions and they went into Thailand, and it was no big deal. Thailand, you know, they didn't give no fight. Now, if a country doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S., it's not so easy. It doesn't mean that the person that fled has an immunity and that it's all good, but it's much harder to snatch someone in another country if the U.S. doesn't have these treaties. Now, why is that important? In the last few decades, the United States, in the United Nations, America has threatened to not give aid, financial aid, military aid to any country that opposes America in these United Nations forums. So whatever issues that they're discussing, if a country opposes America more than 50%, America is now attempting to pass an act that says, okay, you voted against us in the United Nations, so what we're going to do is put you as an opposing threat, and you're going to be looked at as opposing America. We're not going to give you aid anymore. So they're attempting to make this an actual legal situation here, law. Now, why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because when you look in the media, which most of these things are staged anyway, you see countries like Syria, North Korea, right? Iran. These are boogeymans. So you have to ask yourself, they tell you that these individuals are boogeymans because of terrorists. Bullshit. These individuals are boogeymans because they oppose U.S. foreign policy. Period. If you look at Syria, if you look at North Korea, if you look at these places, if you look at all the boogeymans, and this isn't just right now, you can go back to the early 2000s, to the 90s, to the 80s. If you look at all of these decades, and everyone, every leader, every country that they said is a foreign bad guy, evil, has opposed U.S. in their foreign policy. This is the game that's been playing for quite some time. And that's why this whole thing with Russia, because Russia is the only country, the only place that has constantly went against America in the United Nations since the Korean War. And they're one of the 5 controlling bodies in the Security Council, part of the United Nations. So when you see Russia, that's why it's big in the news, because these countries, these bad guys, don't stand for America's stuff. Now, when you see AlphaBay and Silk Road, and you see all of these underground networks that the media, which you didn't see, but when you hear these stories, they're making a big deal about this because it's another form of control. When you see clowns in the Trump administration, Trump is a clown, Jeff Sessions, they had a big press conference about AlphaBay and how they took down the largest drug ring ever. And this was the largest drug ring. And not only that, it was done by cryptocurrency. So these events, which you don't see in the news, even though they had a big press conference with the clown Jeff Sessions and the clown Trump administration, shows that things are changing, right? Currency is changing. The economic reset is here. And when you see things like AlphaBay, it's just going to keep happening. There's going to be another underground network. It's going to be more drugs being bought on the underground, because the biggest drug dealers is this country, period. If you're not selling drugs for this country, then you are eventually going to get caught. That's just what it is, because no one sells more drugs than these banks and these countries. So, in terms of cryptocurrency, I suggest everyone have a vigilant eye. I suggest everyone becomes more technologically astute. I definitely suggest you get in the habit of using alternative search engines, um, and just be more mindful of the technological aspects of everyday life. And I think this blockchain is a good foundation to begin in understanding what the technology of blockchain represents. Start paying attention to how you store your own data. Be aware of how these companies get your data, because data is really the new asset class, right? The next mega money is in who controls data. So if you can control your data and understand how your data is stored, data storage, even if you buy crypto, don't leave your cryptocurrency in an exchange. You know, store it in like a physical wallet, something like this, or they have other means of storage which I'll cover as I learn more about it. But they have different ways of storing your currency. So spread your money out. I was listening to something that said that there's a a shortage in mining platinum. So platinum could be another investment to put your money into, as this economic reset is happening, because it's going to happen. Period. It's going to change. How we spend money, how we store money, what money is changing right in front of our eyes. And this AlphaBay thing is an example of that, because if you can have this dude buy Lamborghinis, houses, and have $12 million in non-cash, non-banks, in cryptocurrency, then that's a sign that this is a new world. This isn't no longer, oh, it's coming, oh, it's here. So you can adjust to that by understanding the technology, becoming more technologically astute, and being more in tune to things like this that you won't see on the media. AlphaBay, Silk Road. There's a dark side to this cryptocurrency. However, if you're on the pulse of it, you can actually use it in ways in which you're not locked down. Spread your money out, have multiple bank accounts, store your crypto in physical locations, and be vigilant as to foreign policy. If you look right now, what just happened is that Palestine just got accepted in the Interpol. That's deep. Now you're talking about there's only two individuals that are permanently cannot be members of the United Nations, right? That's the Vatican, which is sovereign, and Palestine. But Palestine just got accepted in the Interpol. So that means that the international police is expanding, right? And that means that laws are changing. So if the laws are changing and the money is changing, that means that what can be considered a crime is also changing. So basic things that you do that you might think is harmless, because we're not at the pulse of these changes, can be considered a crime. So I think it's important to be more technologically astute. Experiment with alternative search engines, experiment with how you store your information, and just get more into the mind of a technological warrior, right? Because that's going to save you as we change, as opposed to you being left confused and left behind. So with that, I suggest everybody look more into AlphaBay, Silk Road. Get the magazine Nexus, with the cover article is Cryptocurrency, a Tool to Enslave. Look at the NSA paper about crypto back in '96. I suggest you get this book, even though it's funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. So read with a critical eye. They're going to cheerlead for blockchain. And crypto purchase, I definitely suggest no Bitcoin because it's way too much. But I do suggest Ethereum and Ripple and Litecoin. And with that, pay attention to foreign policy, because these things will affect you. And if you think you can escape, you cannot, because this is a global game. However, I do suggest you look up countries that don't have extradition treaties with the U.S. and just look at all the countries that's related to Interpol. So when you watch this news, right, and if you look at the media and who they say are bad guys, then you can start to see that these are individuals that are not terrorists, right? These are individuals that oppose U.S. foreign policy. So when you see North Korea, when you see Russia, when you see Syria, just look up their relation to U.S. and the United Nations forums, right? Just look at what's going on in these courts and these meetings that you don't see. Look up things like Interpol and see who the member nations are, right? look at the IMF's relationship with these countries, and then you'll start to see why these countries are upset at the U.S. That's what they don't tell you, because we have puppets like Trump who focus on fake terrorists, right? We still have these staged events under Trump. He did more nonsense in his first 10 months than Bush did. So he's a puppet. Hillary's a puppet. Nothing happened to Hillary with all these emails. She's still skating. Why? Because Trump and Hillary are family members in fighting for power. Trump is not fighting the establishment. He is the establishment. That's why you'll never see him go against Jews. You'll never see him go against Israel. Why? Because 90+% of issues that come up in the United Nations, guess which country, guess which territory, votes in favor of U.S. policy more than anyone else in the world? Freaking Israel. Donald Trump's best friends. So he's a puppet too, bloodline member, all that. But with that, thank you for your attention. I will bring you more videos. Please leave feedback, subscribe, hit the bell in case YouTube censors my stuff. At least you'll try to get notified somewhat. Peace.